What makes you lose more fat, strength, or cardio? If you're going to improve your body composition, having clarity about which is the best path to follow is crucial. We don't want to waste time. Today you're going to learn about the advantages of strength training or doing cardio in terms of fat loss. At the end of the video, I'll introduce the clear winner, because there is one. Pay attention, because what you're about to learn will forever change the short-term way you relate to physical exercise. Let's start by asking ourselves a question. Why do cardio and fat loss? When we talk about cardio, here we are going to refer to aerobic training at a moderate intensity, always below 70-75% of your V2 max, or if you prefer, of your maximum heart rate. A sustained and moderate cardio, but not a high-intensity cardio. We use this approach to distinguish it from high-intensity interval training or other high-intensity protocols that produce different adaptations. We can discuss high-intensity interval training and fat loss another day if you'd like. Moderate cardio examples include running at a steady pace for 30 minutes using a rowing machine or elliptical, stair climbing, cycling, and swimming. You have it, right? Well, let's now see what specific benefit this type of training has on fat loss. And the first thing that surely comes to your mind is, of course, Borja, cardio burns more calories per session than strength training. Well, is this true? It's only partially true. It's a very widespread myth. Let me explain. The acute energy expenditure is higher in cardio than in strength training, but only at higher intensities, which by definition you won't be able to sustain for a long time. The reality is that low or moderate intensity cardio and strength training per minute consume a similar amount of calories, around 10 or slightly less. You can see it in this image. On the other hand, running for an hour on the treadmill to burn about 600 calories and lose fat is a very short-term approach that I do not recommend. You would be surprised at how easy it is to compensate for that energy burned in the monotonous act of running. But there is a clear advantage of cardio over strength. In the long run, cardio improves your engine. If there is a specific benefit I would highlight from aerobic training, it is that it is the only one capable of substantially improving your maximum oxygen consumption. And at the same time, your oxygen consumption correlates with how good you are at oxidizing fat in your mitochondria. Therefore, trained people with high oxygen consumption usually oxidize much more fat at rest than untrained people. And then I can't stop mentioning the cognitive and mental health benefits. Although it doesn't directly relate to fat loss, it's very important to me. Exercise is much more than a way to improve your body composition. For many of us, it's a therapy. In this sense, the effect on mood generated by aerobic training has no competitor. You feel better immediately and maintain that state for several hours after training. Let's remember that obesity often arises in the context of chronic stress, personal health, family, or economic problems. And in this background, having a tool that mentally frees you is very powerful. On the other hand, many people with excess fat are still reluctant to enter a gym, simply out of embarrassment, stigma, or lack of self-esteem. There aren't many more specific benefits of cardio for fat loss. But before we start talking about strength, I encourage you, if you only like doing cardio, to keep doing cardio. Now let's get into the benefits for long-term strength training fat loss. First, muscle preservation and caloric deficit. In a caloric deficit, your body needs to cover that lack of energy, let's say 500 calories, with tissues that you already have, with something that you already possess. If we simplify, these tissues you turn to are muscle and fat. And the key is that the more muscle your body uses, the less fat it will use, and vice versa. Your body wants to cover the energy deficit generated by practices like intermittent fasting. Without a strong argument for targeting specific tissues, we will lose both fat and muscle at a 3:1 ratio. For every 3 kilos of fat lost, we will also lose 1 kilo of muscle, which is substantial. What is the best argument for your body to attack fat as a source of energy? This is where the role of strength exercise as a muscle protector comes in. If you train strength, the mechanical stimulus generated and the remodeling of the tissue will stop your body from using muscle as fuel. In addition, the more muscle you retain or create, the more fat you will have to burn for energy support, because remember that building muscle is a very energy-intensive process, and so is maintaining it. Conclusion: strength training directs the caloric deficit in the right direction, losing fat and not muscle. Greater excess post-exercise oxygen consumption effect. The excess post-exercise oxygen consumption effect is the oxygen debt that is generated in your body after exercise. You pay this debt in the following hours, 12 to 24 hours, depending on the intensity of the activity. And you pay it with energy, obviously. Although the excess post-exercise oxygen consumption effect difference compared to cardio is small, about 100 more calories, it makes a significant difference in the long term when adding up each workout. Conclusion: if you train strength, you will spend energy all day. With moderate cardio, the expenditure is limited to the time of training. Higher energy expenditure at rest. Cardio is short-term for fat loss. Strength thinks in the long term. What do I mean? That if you adhere to strength training, in a few months you will be spending between 5 and 10% more energy daily without doing anything. Why? Because it increases your resting energy expenditure. As you increase a metabolically active tissue, muscle, and reduce another metabolically quieter, we can say fat. It's the difference between trading your time for money in a job or investing your money in an indexed fund that gives you periodic returns without you doing anything. The first is enslaving, the second is liberating. And this has other ramifications. And that is, the more time you spend strength training, the less it will cost you to achieve a caloric deficit. I'll go further. If you deviate from the diet in the future and gain fat but continue strength training and already have a good amount of muscle, you will be able to lose that fat much more easily in the future. That's why bodybuilders have quite an easy time alternating between bulking and cutting phases by manipulating nutritional variables. Less increase in appetite. There are two factors to take into account in a fat loss process. The first is the compensatory effect of exercise on intake. There are people who have the willpower to go out for a run for an hour daily or every morning, or even to work out for several hours in the gym. However, subsequently, that brutal energy imbalance they have created translates into a voracious appetite that makes them compensate for the calories used during exercise and return to the starting energy point. The second factor is how easy or difficult you find it to maintain the caloric deficit necessary to lose fat. Well, in both factors, strength training is superior to aerobic. Although evidence is mixed, strength training has a weaker appetite-stimulating effect. It gives less hunger, we can say. This leads to fewer compensations after it. It's obvious that many of you believe it makes me extremely hungry. Yes, there are differences between people, but if we compare it with cardio, it generally gives less hunger. Secondly, having less appetite will make it easier to meet your caloric deficit if you feel like you could eat even stones. Just this point, the effect of strength training on appetite, we recently discussed in the video about glucagon-like peptide -1 receptor analogs, and there is a clear synergistic effect between both interventions. You may assume that exercise duration and total daily energy expenditure are linearly related, believing that more training leads to higher overall energy expenditure. I'm sorry, but that's not true. Your body is smart and opposes significant energy imbalances. If one morning you decide to have breakfast and run a half marathon the rest of the day, unconsciously your body will spend much less energy, as long as you are not previously adapted to doing this. Energy that you would have otherwise spent through physical activity, unconscious movements, or both. Fidgeting, which are those unconscious movements of the hands, of the legs that we all do hundreds of times a day, is greatly reduced when the expenditure associated with physical exercise is high. Extreme ultra-endurance tests can lead to a recovery period that may last for weeks, or even months, in which we feel fatigued, without the desire to do anything, and sometimes even depressed. Your body is struggling to save energy by all means. But then, why is strength training superior to cardio? Well, because it doesn't have as much impact on non-exercise activity thermogenesis on the physical activity you do afterwards. It will allow you to continue spending energy the rest of the day, be active, move, have fidgeting, and this in the end has more importance in fat loss than the hour you spend in the gym. Technically, we would say that there is less energy constriction post-workout in strength training than in cardio. This makes you have a greater energy flow, a greater flow of energy, spend more and be able to ingest more and not be so hungry, continue progressing and advancing. So, what's the verdict? It's clear to you now, isn't it? The final answer is that if you have to prioritize one or the other, strength training is more important for losing fat, and we are going to rely on this recent meta-analysis to corroborate it. It aims to answer the question, what intervention is most effective for losing fat? Interventions that are applied to people with obesity. Well, in view of this and other meta-analyses that analyze the same question, strength training is more effective than aerobic for losing fat. But beware, also more effective in this work than the combination of aerobic and strength, the famous concurrent, mixed or hybrid training. We have seen the reasons in the previous section. But Borja, do I have to stop doing cardio if I want to lose fat? Look, if your goal is to lose fat and nothing else, that's your only goal. You don't have a health goal, a longevity goal, you don't have a cardiovascular prevention goal, you have no other goal than to lose the maximum amount of fat. Then what you have to ensure is that you are strength training at the sufficient intensity and volumes. Once you have ensured this, you can do cardio if you want, of course, but never the other way around. In fact, you know that my personal recommendation is hybrid training, combining both modalities. Since cardio is the most efficient way to improve your oxygen consumption, we have said it, and this parameter is related to more longevity and quality of life. In conclusion, if you want to lose fat, strength training is the undisputed king and it's non-negotiable. It's more energetically costly in the long run and facilitates energy deficit, and from the age of 50 it's even more important, as in addition to improving your body composition, it's contributing to you remaining independent in the next decade. Now, thank you for staying until the end, a big hug, and keep on empowering.